Welcome back to the deep dive. We take all the sources you know, the court records, the news reports, the analysis, and boil it down so you get the full picture fast.
And today, we're tackling a really heavy one, a case that just completely captivated and honestly horrified the public for years.
Absolutely. It was dubbed a trial of the century, right up there with O.J. Simpson. We're talking about the 1989 murders of Jose Menendez, the big shot entertainment exec, and his wife, Kitty.
Murdered by their own sons, Lyle and Erik Menendez, in their Beverly Hills mansion. It was just brutal.
Yeah. And this isn't just about the crime itself, though we'll get into the grim details. Our sources cover, everything. The family background, the night of the murders, the trial.
And that trial was explosive. You had these two competing narratives hitting head-on. Was it cold-blooded murder for money, or was it self-defense after years of horrific abuse? That conflict led to two hung juries in the first trial.
It's fascinating and kind of disturbing how those two narratives could coexist. Our mission today is really to unpack how that happened. Look at the core facts from our sources. Try to understand the evidence for premeditation versus the evidence for abuse.
And crucially, we need to cover the latest developments. Because after decades of serving life without parole, there's been this sudden, huge shift. We're talking resentencing, parole eligibility, stuff happening right up into 2025.
Exactly. So they were convicted, second trial, first-degree murder, special circumstances lying in, conspiracy, sentence, life, no parole. That seemed final.
For decades it was. Appeals denied, petitions denied. But recent events involving the LA District Attorney's Office and new court rulings, well, they've completely reopened the question of their future.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. The family itself. Because you can't really understand the crime without understanding the dynamic, right?
Right. And the sources paint this picture of extreme wealth and success on the surface, but underneath.
Yeah.
Just immense dysfunction. And it all kind of revolved around the father, Jose Menendez.
Yeah, tell us about Jose. He had this sort of classic immigrant success story, but with a dark twist alleged later.
Exactly. Born in Cuba in 1944, came to the U.S. at 15 after the revolution, met Kitty Anderson, married her pretty young, 1963.
Yeah.
And Jose was driven. I mean, really driven.
Got his accounting degree, climbed the ladder.
Fast. Executive at Hertz, then RCA Records. That becomes important later. And finally, CEO of Live Entertainment. That was a big deal. Film distribution, home video. He was powerful.
And that power, that drive, that perfectionism.
Yeah.
The defense really seized on that, didn't they? Painting him as this cruel, controlling figure.
Absolutely central to their case. And Kitty, the mother, she wasn't spared either in the defense narrative.
What was the portrayal of her?
She'd quit teaching when Lyle was born. The defense argued she was an enabler of Jose's alleged behavior, but also deeply troubled herself. Selfish, mentally unstable, issues with alcohol, drugs, even violent towards the boys, according to the defense claims.
So not just a dysfunctional family, but like a pressure cooker. Totally at odds with the image they projected, right? Living in Beverly Hills.
Completely. And the sons, Lyle, born 68, and Erik, born 70, they were raised in this intense environment, sent to pretty prestigious schools, Princeton Day School back east, then Beverly Hills High.
But even before the murders, there were some serious red flags, weren't there? Especially with Lyle.
Oh, definitely. Lyle got suspended from Princeton University, not just for poor grades, but for plagiarism and fraud.
Okay, that's serious.
And his behavior in the dorms.
Yeah.
It sounds pretty extreme. Disruptive, apparently overflowing sinks on purpose, repainting rooms without permission, even throwing out his roommate's stuff because he didn't want to share. It's just, major boundary issues, maybe entitlement.
And it wasn't just acting out at school. There was actual criminal activity before the murders.
Yeah, this is a crucial point the prosecution used later. Our sources confirm that back in 1988, when they still lived in New Jersey, the brothers pulled off several burglaries, stole over $100,000 in cash and jewelry from neighbors' houses.
Wow, so this wasn't their first foray into crime.
Not at all. And the prosecution argued this showed a pattern of calculated criminal behavior, deception, and importantly, financial motive, long before the murders. It kind of undermines the narrative of them just being terrified, helpless victims lashing out.
Right, which leads us directly into the planning for the murders. The prosecution's case really hinged on proving premeditation. How did they show that?
Well, there were two really damning pieces of evidence suggesting planning. First, the screenplay.
The screenplay, tell me about that.
Erik, while he was still in high school, actually co-wrote this amateur script called Friends with a Classmate. And the plot. It was about a rich kid who plans and commits the perfect murder of his parents to get the inheritance.
You're kidding. That's eerily specific.
It's incredibly specific. The sources showed the prosecution presented it as basically a fictional rehearsal for the real thing,
Okay, that's one. What was the other piece?
the gun purchase. This wasn't an impulsive grab. They specifically tried to buy handguns first, a couple of days before the murders.
But they couldn't.
No, they ran into issues. California's mandatory 2-week waiting period, plus something was wrong with Lyle's driver's license. So they were blocked.
So what did they do? They didn't give up.
No. They pivoted, drove about 120 miles south to San Diego, went to a Big Five sporting goods store, and they didn't get pistols. They bought 2 Mossberg 12-gauge shotguns.
Shotguns, those are powerful weapons.
Extremely powerful hunting weapons. They bought both birdshot and buckshot ammunition. And because Erik was underage to buy them, he used a stolen driver's license. Belonged to a friend of Lyle's.
So driving hours, using a stolen ID, buying heavy artillery, that doesn't exactly scream spur of the moment, does it?
It screams planning. Absolute deliberate planning and commitment to getting those specific weapons right before the murders happened.
Which brings us to the night itself, August 20th, 1989. Jose and Kitty are at home.
Yeah, in the den of their mansion. Watching TV, ironically, a James Bond movie, The Spy Who Loved Me.
And then the brothers came in. The crime scene, the police described it as horrific.
Beyond horrific. Officers said it was the most brutal scene they'd ever encountered. Just absolute carnage.
What were the specifics?
Jose was shot 6 times. The final fatal shot was point blank to the back of his head, like an execution.
Oh, my God. And Kitty?
Kitty's death was even more brutal, if that's possible. She was shot 10 times. 10.
10 times.
And the details are chilling. The evidence shows she was already down on the floor trying to crawl away. Lyle apparently went out of the room, reloaded his shotgun, came back in.
They reloaded.
He reloaded, came back, and fired the final shot directly into her face, her cheek area. The autopsy described multiple lacerations of the brain from that contact shot. Jose's autopsy mentioned explosive decapitation.
That level of violence, the reloading, the contact shot to Kitty while she's already down, it's hard to square that with the idea of panicked self-defense, isn't it?
It's incredibly difficult. It suggests something much more calculated, more like rage or ensuring absolute silence. That overkill became a major point for the prosecution.
Okay, so after this massacre, they immediately move into cover-up mode.
Instantly. Their actions right after show clear thinking, even if it was a bit clumsy. They got rid of their clothes, presumably blood-stained. They drove out and buried the shotgun somewhere along Mulholland Drive.
And then the alibi attempt, that was kind of botched, wasn't it?
Yeah, a bit amateurish, maybe arrogant. They first went to a movie theater, planning to buy tickets for Batman to show they were out.
But realized the tickets would be time-stamped.
Exactly. They realized the timestamp would prove they weren't home during the murders. So, quick change of plan. They ditched that idea and instead drove over to Santa Monica to the Taste of L.A. Food Festival. So acted like nothing happened.
And then, probably the most infamous part of the immediate aftermath, the 911 call.
Oh, yeah. Lyle's call. It's become legendary, hysterical screaming, "Someone killed my parents."
The prosecution later played that in court, right, to suggest he was acting.
They did. They argued it showed his ability to manipulate, to put on a performance. And critically, when the police arrived at the house, Lyle didn't just seem like a grieving son.
What did he do?
He immediately started suggesting theories, planting the idea that it must have been business-related, implying, a mob hit connected to Jose's work.
Trying to steer the investigation away from them from minute one.
Precisely. And because the scene was so incredibly violent, so professional-looking in its brutality, the police initially kind of bought it. They focused on the mob angle.
And crucially, they didn't test the brothers for gunshot residue right away.
No. Big mistake. That initial focus on an outside hit meant they missed collecting potentially key forensic evidence from Lyle and Erik themselves in those first critical hours.
Yeah.
So, yeah, initially the investigation was all about Jose's business dealings. Could it be the mafia, disgruntled partners? The sheer violence pointed away from, typical family disputes.
And Lyle had planted that seed effectively, but that focus didn't last long, did it? What shifted the police suspicion onto the brothers?
Money. And just their behavior. It was a classic tell. The heirs start acting really, really weirdly and spending a lot of money.
Ah, the spending spree. This became huge news. How much did they actually spend and how quickly?
In the roughly 7 months between the murders and their arrest, they burned through about $700,000.
$700,000? Where did that come from?
Mostly from a life insurance payout. There was a $650,000 policy on Jose that paid out relatively quickly. And they just went wild with it.
Wild how? What kinds of things were they buying? Because $700 K back then, that's serious cash.
Oh, it was extravagant. Lyle bought a restaurant, Chuck's Spring Street Cafe, apparently a buffalo wing joint back in New Jersey. He also bought himself 3 Rolex watches, very flashy, and a Porsche Carrera sports car.
Okay, so Lyle's going for status symbols. What about Erik?
Erik's big spend was on his tennis career. He hired a full-time professional tennis coach and started traveling overseas to play in tournaments, trying to go pro, basically.
And their lifestyle in general.
Completely changed. They ditched the family home, obviously, and moved into these plush, adjoining condos down in Marina del Rey. They were constantly seen eating out at expensive restaurants, taking trips Caribbean, London, just living large.
It's just that the psychology of that is so stark, isn't it? If you're supposedly devastated and traumatized, you don't typically buy Rolexes and Porsches the next month.
Exactly. The prosecution argued it showed zero remorse, zero trauma. It looked like they felt entitled to the money and the lifestyle, and their parents were just an obstacle that had been removed.
And wasn't there that really famous, kind of bizarre piece of visual evidence from this period, the trading card?
Oh yeah, the Mark Jackson trading card. It's incredible. They were sitting courtside at a New York Knicks game, looking totally relaxed, and they just happened to be captured in the background of a photo used for this NBA player's trading card.
That image just became iconic, didn't it? Symbolizing their absolute arrogance and detachment.
Completely. It was like a snapshot of their post-murder freedom spree.
But it wasn't just about spending the insurance money. The prosecution also tied their motive back to the larger inheritance, specifically involving the will, right?
Yes, the will was crucial for the premeditation argument. Lyle apparently confided in a friend, a guy named Glenn Stevens.
What did he say?
He told Stevens he'd made a special trip back home from Princeton shortly before the murders, specifically to delete a new will Jose had drafted on the family computer.
Why? What was wrong with the new will?
Lyle believed, or claimed to believe, that this new will would have left less money to him and Erik. He apparently told Stevens, "I went there and erased it."
And was there any proof of this beyond what the friend said?
Yes. Later, a computer expert, actually hired by Lyle himself for other reasons, confirmed that Lyle had asked him about securely deleting files related to his father's estate planning from that computer.
So that connects the dots pretty clearly. Delete the unfavorable will, commit the murders, inherit everything under the old will, then spend the insurance payout immediately. It paints a strong picture of financial motive.
It does. Even though, interestingly, the grand jury initially decided not to include financial gain as one of the special circumstances for the murder charges. They focused on lying in wait. But the money aspect was always hovering.
Okay, so the spending is raising eyebrows, the will story is damning, but what actually led to the arrests? It wasn't the financial trail directly, was it?
No, the case cracked open because of the psychologist, Dr. Jerome Oziel.
Right, the infamous Oziel tapes. How did that come about?
Erik confessed first. He went to Dr. Oziel and admitted they killed their parents. His initial reason, according to Oziel, wasn't greed, but this overwhelming desire to be free from his father's control, his impossibly high standards.
So Erik confesses. Does Oziel go straight to the police?
No, not initially. Doctor-patient confidentiality is a big deal. But then, things got complicated. Oziel claimed that Lyle found out about Erik's confession and threatened Oziel's life if he revealed anything.
A threat. Okay, that changes things legally.
Big time.
Yeah.
That alleged threat, Oziel argued, broke the confidentiality privilege. So, fearing for his safety, Oziel started secretly recording his therapy sessions with both brothers.
And these tapes captured more incriminating details.
Apparently so. But the police still didn't know about them.
So how did the tapes finally surface? It wasn't Oziel who turned them in, was it?
No, it was Oziel's mistress, Judalon Smith. Talk about a dramatic twist.
A mistress?
Yeah.
Seriously?
Smith and Oziel had this really messy, tumultuous relationship. After they broke up, apparently she was feeling scorned, maybe scared herself, and she went to the Beverly Hills police. She told them everything about the brothers' confessions, about the secret tapes Oziel had made.
Wow, so the whole case basically hinged on this jilted mistress spilling the beans.
Pretty much. That leak led directly to search warrants, the seizure of the tapes, and then the arrests. Lyle was arrested first, March 8th, 1990, right outside the mansion. Erik was actually out of the country.
Where was he?
Playing in a tennis tournament in Israel. He heard about Lyle's arrest, flew back, and turned himself in 3 days later.
All right, so the arrests happen, the tapes are potential evidence. Now we head towards the trial. And this wasn't just any trial. It became a national obsession, largely because it was televised, right?
Absolutely. The first trial, especially. It set the stage for this massive public debate. Were these spoiled, greedy killers, or were they traumatized victims finally snapping?
Before the trial even started, there were huge legal fights over those Oziel tapes. Could they even be used?
That was the critical pretrial battle. The defense fought tooth and nail to keep them out, citing doctor-patient privilege. Judge Albrecht, the first judge, initially ruled them admissible, mainly because of Lyle's alleged threat against Oziel.
But it went up to the higher court.
Oh yeah, it went all the way to the California Supreme Court. In 1992, they issued a complex ruling. They said most of the tapes were admissible because the threat vitiated the privilege. However, they did rule that the specific tape where Erik first confessed the murders couldn't be played for the jury.
So the jury heard incriminating stuff from the tapes, but not the initial explicit confession.
Exactly. They heard things that undermined the defense, but not the absolute smoking gun of the first confession. It was a partial victory for both sides, in a way.
Okay, and let's just quickly recap the charges again. First-degree murder, 2 counts. But the special circumstance wasn't financial gain, it was
Lying in wait. This is really important for you listening. Lying in wait in California law means showing that the killers concealed their purpose, waited for an opportunity, and then attacked their victims by surprise. It implies planning and ambush.
And why is that specific charge so significant?
Because proving lying in wait automatically makes it first-degree murder and, crucially, makes the defendants eligible for the death penalty. It also directly contradicts any defense claim of a spontaneous heat of passion killing or immediate self-defense. The prosecution went for the death penalty.
Oh, right. So the first trial kicks off in 93, cameras rolling, court TV is born, basically. And the defense, led by the now famous Leslie Abramson for Erik, drops the abuse bombshell. Let's unpack that defense strategy.
Their entire strategy was mitigation. They weren't arguing innocence in the sense of not killing them. They were arguing it wasn't murder, it was manslaughter, committed in self-defense or imperfect self-defense due to years of unbearable abuse.
What kind of abuse did they allege?
Horrific abuse. Sexual, emotional, physical. Lyle claimed the sexual abuse started when he was just 6, but stopped around age 8. Erik testified it was ongoing, right up until about 2 weeks before the murders. He claimed it happened to him for years.
And they painted Jose as the main abuser.
Yes, as this monstrous pedophile, obsessed with control, incredibly cruel. And Kitty, the mother, was portrayed as his enabler, someone who knew or should have known and failed to protect them. They even claimed she was unstable and abusive herself.
So how did the defense explain the gun purchase then? If they were these terrified victims, why buy shotguns days before?
Their explanation was that Jose had found out they might expose him, and he had explicitly threatened to kill them first. So the guns, they claimed, were bought purely for protection and self-defense against what they saw as an imminent threat from their own father.
In the actual shooting, how did they frame that?
They claimed that on that night, Jose's behavior, closing the den door, which they said was unusual, signaled to them that the attack was coming right then. It was the final trigger. Erik testified something like, "I just went into the room and started firing." A panicked reaction, they argued.
But the prosecution, Pam Bozanich and Lester Kriyama, they came back hard against this narrative, didn't they? Using the premeditation evidence.
Absolutely. Bozanich especially kept hammering on the legal definition of manslaughter and self-defense in California. It requires immediate or imminent danger. She argued buying shotguns 2 days earlier, driving 120 miles, using a fake ID, the sheer number of shots fired, the reloading. None of that fits imminent danger.
And they used the parts of the Oziel tapes that were allowed?
Yes. Critically, on those tapes, while the brothers complained bitterly about their father's control and their mother's instability, the prosecution pointed out there was no mention of the sexual abuse they later claimed was the trigger.
That's a huge hole in the defense timeline.
Huge. And the prosecution played Lyle's recorded statements from the tapes that sounded chillingly cold, not fearful, like saying they were doing her Kitty a favor, putting her out of her misery, and that killing her showed great courage.
That sounds more like contempt than terror.
Exactly. And Dr. Oziel himself, in the testimony alive from his sessions, stated he believed they killed out of hatred and out of a desire to be free from their father's domination, not out of fear or imminent danger.
The prosecution also pointed out that nobody heard about this abuse until after the arrests, right?
Yeah, for 7 months from the murders until they had their high-powered defense team. Not a single friend, relative, teacher, or even the police heard a whisper about sexual abuse. That timing looked incredibly suspicious, like the defense was constructed after the fact.
And they caught Lyle trying to manipulate witnesses, too.
Yes. Lyle himself admitted on the stand that he tried to bribe his ex-girlfriend, Jamie Pisarcik. He asked her to lie and testify that Jose had made unwanted sexual advances towards her, presumably to bolster the image of Jose as a predator.
That's incredibly damaging to his credibility.
Devastating. And then Bozanich played that dramatic 911 call for the jury, arguing it was all an act, proof of Lyle's ability to fake emotion and deceive.
There were other strange details, too, like the cinnamon thing.
Oh, right, that was bizarre. Erik testified he put cinnamon in his father's drinks to improve the taste of semen after alleged forced oral sex. The prosecution challenged this, arguing cinnamon has such a strong flavor, Jose would have surely noticed. It just added to the list of questionable details.
So with all this prosecution evidence, the planning, the tapes, the spending, the inconsistencies, the attempted witness tampering, you'd expect a conviction, right? But the first trial ended with
A stunning result. 2 deadlocked juries, 1 for each brother. Mistrial declared in January 1994. Total shock.
Why? What happened? The sources mention a gender split in the juries.
That seemed to be the main reason. Remember, this trial was televised. Millions watched the brothers cry on the stand as they detailed the alleged abuse. Reports indicated that many female jurors found the abuse testimony compelling, maybe identifying with the trauma, and leaned towards manslaughter. They saw the brothers perhaps as damaged victims.
Well, the male jurors.
The male jurors reportedly focused more on the objective facts. The gun purchase, the reloading, the lies, the spending spree. They saw a premeditated murder. It was this stark divide, reflecting maybe a broader societal split at the time on how to weigh claims of trauma against cold, hard evidence of planning.
And this was happening right around the time of the O.J. Simpson case unfolding, too.
Yeah.
Massive pressure on the DA's office.
Huge pressure. Gil Garcetti was the L.A. district attorney. He couldn't afford another high-profile loss or hung jury, so he decided to retry them, but with some major changes.
What changed for the second trial, starting in 1995?
The biggest change. Judge Weisberg, the new judge, banned cameras from the courtroom, no more televised spectacle. This completely shifted the dynamic. It became less of a public drama, more of a focused legal proceeding.
Did the strategies change much?
The prosecution doubled down on premeditation and deception. And significantly, Lyle Menendez did not testify in the second trial. His emotional performance in the first trial had clearly backfired with half the jurors.
So, no Lyle on the stand. How did the prosecution hammer home the deception?
They presented more evidence of Lyle trying to manipulate stories. They had a letter he wrote to another ex-girlfriend, Tracy Baker, basically coaching her on what to say, including a line like, "We will decide later around what date this incident occurred." Just blatant fabrication.
Ouch. And the abuse defense, was it still central?
It was still their core defense, yes. They brought in PTSD expert John Wilson again, arguing Erik showed signs of severe trauma, like a fight-or-flight response conditioned by abuse.
But the prosecution had counter-arguments.
Oh, yeah. They brought in their own famous forensic psychiatrist, Dr. Park Dietz. Dietz argued Erik didn't fit the profile of someone suffering from learned helplessness, typically seen in long-term abuse victims. Why? Because Erik was clearly capable of complex planning, buying the guns, practicing with them, carrying out the murders. That proactive violence didn't fit helplessness.
That's the core paradox again, isn't it? How can you be both paralyzed by trauma and a meticulous planner?
Exactly. And Judge Weisberg made some crucial rulings that really restricted the defense this time. He ruled there simply wasn't enough evidence to claim imminent danger for self-defense.
So self-defense was off the table.
Legally, yes. He did allow the defense to argue that maybe the shooting of Jose could have been considered in the heat of passion, a lesser form of manslaughter, but, and this was key, he specifically disallowed the heat of passion defense for the murder of Kitty.
Why not for Kitty?
Because the evidence showed she wasn't posing any threat. She was crawling away. He ruled there was zero evidence she provoked them in that moment, and her killing looked purely like a calculated execution, part of the original plan. That ruling was devastating for the defense.
And was there any new evidence about the financial motive in the second trial?
Yes, something that hadn't come out as clearly in the first. Testimony revealed that just 2 days after the murders, the brothers showed up at the home of an attorney's wife with a safe they'd taken from the house.
What were they doing with the safe?
They were desperately hoping to find a copy of Jose's will inside it. The safe turned out to be empty, but the act itself, prioritizing finding the will just 48 hours after killing their parents, screamed financial motive. It strongly reinforced the prosecution's narrative about greed.
So no cameras, tighter judicial control, more evidence of deception and financial motive. What was the outcome this time?
No deadlock. In 1996, the second jury convicted both Lyle and Erik on all counts. 2 counts of first-degree murder, with the special circumstances of lying in wait found true, plus conspiracy to commit murder.
In the sentence?
Life in prison without the possibility of parole. So after the 1996 convictions, the legal battles didn't exactly stop, but they moved into the appeals phase. The brothers argued trial errors, ineffective counsel, all the usual grounds.
But those initial appeals didn't go anywhere.
No. The California Court of Appeal upheld the convictions in 1998. The Supreme Court of California declined to review the case. Then they started filing habeas corpus petitions.
Okay, let's clarify that term, habeas corpus. For you listening, what does that really mean in this context? Why do prisoners file these?
Right, so a habeas corpus petition, it literally means produce the body, is basically a last resort after direct appeals fail. You're arguing that your imprisonment itself is illegal, usually because your constitutional rights were violated during the trial or investigation.
Like maybe your lawyer was terrible or the prosecution hid evidence.
Exactly. Or, and this becomes crucial later for the Menendez case, maybe there's significant new evidence that proves your innocence or undermines the conviction, evidence that wasn't available or known at the time of the trial.
And the brothers filed these petitions. How did they fare initially?
They filed multiple petitions in both state and federal courts through the late 90s and early 2000s. Our sources show denials in 1999, 2003, 2005. Basically, the courts consistently rejected their claims for decades. The life sentences seemed absolutely set in stone.
Meanwhile, life goes on, even in prison, and both brothers actually got married while serving life sentences. That always strikes people as strange.
It does highlight the weird sort of celebrity status that sometimes attaches to infamous inmates. Lyle married first in 1996. Her name was Anna Erickson, a former model. They actually got married over the telephone, which just shows you the bizarre reality of prison relationships.
Did that last?
No, they divorced in 2001. Apparently, she found out he was writing letters to another woman. He had remarried in 2003 to a woman named Rebecca Sneed. They got married in a prison visiting room. Reports say they separated just recently in 2024.
Okay, and Erik, he married too.
Yes, Erik married Tammy Rusakwan in 1999, also in a prison waiting room at Folsom State Prison. And that marriage seems to have lasted.
Has she spoken publicly about it?
She has. She even self-published a book about their relationship in 2005. She confirmed some surreal details, like their wedding cake was literally a Twinkie.
A Twinkie wedding cake? Wow.
Yeah. She also shared that her own daughter, from a previous relationship, calls Erik her Earth Dad, indicating a real, albeit unconventional, family dynamic. Erik has said publicly that Tammy is what gets me through, showing how vital that connection is for surviving a life sentence.
Okay, so decades pass, appeals fail, they build lives of a sort inside prison. Then suddenly, around 2023, things start to change dramatically. What prompted this recent push for resentencing?
It really comes down to genuinely new evidence emerging, evidence that directly supports the abuse narrative they presented at trial. This gave their lawyers fresh grounds for those habeas corpus petitions.
What was the key piece of new evidence?
The most significant was an allegation from Roy Rosillo, a former member of the boy band Menudo. This came out publicly and was cited in a May 2023 legal filing.
Menudo. Okay, what did Rosillo allege? This seems completely out of left field.
Rosillo claimed that when he was just 14 years old, back when Menudo was huge, Jose Menendez had drugged and sexually assaulted him. He alleged it happened at the Menendez family home in New Jersey.
And what's the connection? Why would Jose Menendez be interacting with a member of Menudo?
Because Jose was an executive at RCA Records at the time, and RCA was Menudo's label. This wasn't just a random encounter. Jose was in a position of power over these young performers.
Okay, that context is chilling. And critically, this is an allegation from someone outside the family alleging the same type of predatory behavior the brothers describe.
Exactly. It provides potential external corroboration. It suggests a pattern. Suddenly, the brothers' claims look less like isolated, self-serving lies and more like part of a potential history of abuse perpetrated by Jose using his status and power. This was huge.
Was there anything else cited in that 2023 appeal?
Yes. There was also the matter of a letter allegedly written by Erik back in 1988, before the murders, to his cousin, Andy Cano.
And what was supposedly in this letter?
The lawyers claimed the letter explicitly discussed the abuse Erik was suffering at the hands of his father. An author named Robert Rand, who wrote a book on the case, claimed he discovered this letter in 2018.
If that letter is real and dated 1988, That blows a massive hole in the prosecution's argument that the abuse story was fabricated after the arrests, doesn't it?
It absolutely would. It would be proof that Erik was talking about the abuse before any legal defense was necessary. Its authenticity and why it wasn't used earlier became points of contention, but its existence fueled the new legal push.
So this new evidence, Rossello's allegation and the letter, created enough momentum for political action.
It seems so. In October 2024, the Los Angeles District Attorney at the time, George Gascon, made a major announcement. His office had reviewed the case, including the new evidence, and they are recommending resentencing for the Menendez brothers.
Wow. The DA's office recommending resentencing after decades. That's a bombshell. What was Gascon's reasoning?
Gascon basically adopted a more modern, trauma-informed perspective. He stated publicly that he believed the brothers had endured a tremendous amount of dysfunction in the home and molestation. He acknowledged the premeditation meant manslaughter wasn't the right original charge, but he felt their sentences should be reconsidered, taking into account the abuse, the decades they'd already served, and their behavior in prison.
But then politics intervened, right? LA elected a new district attorney.
Correct. Nathan Hochman won the election, and his stance was dramatically different. Almost immediately after taking office, Hochman announced his opposition to the habeas corpus petition seeking resentencing.
What was Hochman's argument? Back to the original prosecution view.
Pretty much, he called the self-defense claims self-serving lies. He specifically questioned the credibility of that 1988 Cano later, asking why, if it was so crucial, wasn't it presented during the original trials. It highlighted this deep ideological divide on how the justice system should weigh historical trauma against the facts of a brutal crime.
So the new DA opposed it, but the resentencing hearing still went ahead based on Gascon's earlier recommendation and the new evidence, and also based on their age at the time.
Yes, the judge proceeded. A key factor was a California law related to offenders who committed crimes when they were under 26 years old, which both brothers were. This law allows for reconsideration of life without parole sentences under certain circumstances. So in May 2025, the judge made a ruling.
And what was the ruling?
The judge resentenced both Lyle and Erik Menendez to 50 years to life. 50 to life.
50 to life. What does that mean practically? Does that mean they get out?
Not automatically, but what it did mean was monumental. It made them eligible for parole consideration. For the first time since 1996, there was a potential pathway, however distant, to release. The life without parole sentence was officially changed.
So the door to freedom creaked open, but it didn't stay open long.
No. The California Parole Board reviewed their cases very quickly after the resentencing, and in August 2025, just a few months later, both Lyle and Erik were denied parole.
Denied? On what grounds, after all that?
The board cited ongoing issues, specifically rule violations while incarcerated, and lingering concerns about public safety. Erik's denial mentioned general rule violations. Lyle's denial specifically pointed to repeated infractions involving having contraband cell phones in prison.
Cell phones. So prison behavior, not the original crime or the abuse, became the immediate roadblock.
It appears so. It shows that even with the sentence changed to allow for parole, actually getting parole is a whole separate process, heavily dependent on demonstrating rehabilitation and following institutional rules strictly. They're eligible to go before the board again, but not until 2028.
It's just incredible how this case continues to evolve. But beyond the legal twists and turns, we have to talk about the massive cultural impact. This case wasn't just news, it became part of our cultural fabric.
Oh, absolutely, especially that first trial, allowing the cameras in, spearheaded by Judge Ito, who later presided over the OJ trial too. It basically launched court TV and created this template for televised courtroom drama. The public was glued to it.
And it spawned countless adaptations, right? Movies, TV shows.
Nonstop. There were multiple made-for-TV movies almost immediately back in 1994. More recently, you had Lifetime's Menendez, Blood Brothers in 2017, and NBC did a season of Law & Order True Crime focused entirely on them.
And didn't Netflix just have a huge hit with their story?
Yeah, the Ryan Murphy anthology series Monsters. The second season, which came out in 2024, focused on Lyle and Erik. It was massively popular and really brought the case, particularly the abuse allegations, to a whole new generation that might not have known the details. Documentaries, too, like Menendez Murders, Erik Tells All. The appetite for the story is still huge.
It became so well known it was instantly ripe for parody, too, wasn't it?
Oh, immediately. Saturday Night Live did sketches about the trial back in '93. The 1996 movie The Cable Guy, with Jim Carrey, has that whole sequence that directly satirizes the trial's media frenzy and specifically makes fun of Lyle's overwrought 911 call.
Right, I remember that.
And just references popped up everywhere. Throwaway lines in shows like The Sopranos, Gilmore Girls, other episodes of Law and Order that clearly drew inspiration. Even the People v. O.J. Simpson series referenced the Menendez trial because they overlapped and shared some key legal figures like Leslie Abramson and Judge ITA.
And we can't forget the Knicks game trading card, that bizarre, tangible piece of pop culture history.
That card is wild. It perfectly captured that moment of brazenness.
The cultural reach is just undeniable, to the point where even major celebrities feel compelled to weigh in now. Kim Kardashian wrote that essay, right?
Yeah, in October 2024, aligning with Gascon's push, Kim Kardashian published this widely read essay arguing for their release, or at least resentencing. She argued that if the case were tried today, with our current understanding of trauma and abuse, the outcome would have been dramatically different. It shows how the case remains a touchstone for debates about justice, trauma, and media.
So after digging through all these sources, where does this leave us? And more importantly, where does it leave you trying to make sense of it all? It feels like we're stuck between two incredibly powerful opposing forces.
That's exactly it. You have, on one hand, undeniable evidence of premeditation. The careful gun purchase, the use of shotguns, the overkill, the attempted alibi, the erasing of the will, the immediate spending spree, the lies. It's a mountain of evidence pointing to a calculated double murder for freedom and money.
But then, on the other hand, you have this persistent and now externally somewhat corroborated narrative of profound long-term abuse. Rossello's allegations, the potential 1988 letter, it paints a picture of genuine terror and psychological damage inflicted by the parents, especially Jose.
Right. So the core conflict we've traced isn't just a simple guilty, not guilty. It's about why. Was the driving force greed and entitlement, or was it the desperate, albeit horrifically violent act of deeply traumatized individuals pushed beyond their breaking point? The evidence genuinely supports both interpretations to some degree.
And the recent legal moves, starting with DA Gascon's recommendation and the judge's resentencing decision in May 2025, seem like an attempt by the system to finally acknowledge that complexity, wouldn't you say?
I think so. Resentencing them to 50 to life wasn't saying they were innocent, or even that it was manslaughter. The murder convictions stand. But it was acknowledging that their youth at the time of the crime, combined with the now stronger evidence of severe abuse, warranted a chance at parole, a chance life without parole denied them. It was trying to apply that modern, trauma-informed lens Gascon talked about.
Yet that chance was immediately snatched away by the parole board in August 2025, and the reasons given weren't about the original crime's brutality or the abuse context, but about cell phones.
Yeah, Lyle's cell phone infractions, Erik's unspecified rule violations. It shows this disconnect, perhaps. While the courts might be evolving to reconsider the context of the crime based on new understanding of trauma, the parole system seems, at least for now, more focused on the conduct within prison as the primary measure of rehabilitation and public safety risk.
Which leaves us with a really challenging final thought, doesn't it? A question that hangs over not just this case, but potentially many others as our understanding of trauma evolves.
Definitely. The question is, when you have a case like this, defined by such extreme conflicting realities, perpetrators who are also victims, a crime that was both brutally planned and potentially rooted in years of terror, does our current justice system, which often seeks clear-cut binary answers, actually possess the tools to fully reconcile those contradictions?
Can the system truly weigh new evidence of profound historical abuse against the hard facts of a meticulously planned, horrific crime, especially decades after the fact? The Menendez brothers' next parole hearing in 2028 might give us another glimpse into that answer, but the fundamental tension remains.
It really does. It forces you to grapple with whether justice can ever be fully achieved when the narrative is this fractured, this complex, and this deeply disturbing on all sides.